The night air hung heavy with autumn's chill as Michael Reeves stood rigid outside the mahogany door, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. 3 months behind on rent. A daughter with medical bills piling up, and now this, standing guard outside a billionaire's bedroom like some medieval sentry. The classified ad had seemed straightforward. Private security for high-profile executive. The reality was something else entirely. "Remember, Mr. Reeves." Victoria Chen's voice carried through the door, soft yet commanding. "You don't leave this post until 6 a.m., no matter what you hear." Michael swallowed hard, thinking of 8-year-old Emma sleeping at his sister's apartment again. The weight of absence pressed against his chest heavier than the gun holstered beneath his jacket. This job paid triple his previous security position, but at what cost to his dignity? Earlier that evening, Victoria had explained with clinical detachment, "I have enemies, Mr. Reeves. People who might take advantage of vulnerability." Her eyes had flickered with something that looked almost like fear before hardening again. "Your background check was impeccable. Former military. Excellent references. But more importantly, you have something to lose." A muffled whimper came from behind the door, freezing Michael mid-thought. His hand instinctively moved toward the handle before stopping. The contract had been explicit: never enter unless given the code word. Never question. Just guard. The sound came again, not fear, he realized, but the quiet sobs of someone who thought themselves alone. Michael's jaw tightened. He'd sold his pride for $200 a night, but perhaps that was the price of being a father. Tomorrow, he'd pay this month's medical bills. Tomorrow, Emma would smile again. The hallway clock ticked relentlessly as Michael settled into his vigil, wondering what demons haunted the woman behind the door, and if they were any match for the ones he carried himself. "I was 7 when they broke in." Victoria's voice drifted through the bedroom door on the 14th night of Michael's strange employment. The confession hung in the midnight air, unexpected and raw. Michael's hand froze mid-polish on his service badge, his breath caught in his throat. For 2 weeks, they'd exchanged nothing beyond professional courtesies. Now this. "They held my parents at gunpoint while I hid in the closet," she continued, her voice smaller than he'd ever heard from the commanding CEO. "I watched through the slats. I've never felt safe sleeping alone since." Michael leaned his broad shoulder against the wall beside her door, the weight of her confession pressing against his chest. "My Emma's afraid of the dark too," he offered, surprising himself with the personal disclosure. "She sleeps with this tattered unicorn nightlight I can barely afford to keep batteries in." The silence that followed felt different, warmer somehow. Michael could almost feel Victoria moving closer to the door on the other side. "Tell me about her," Victoria whispered, and something in her voice made Michael's eyes sting with unexpected tears. He spoke of Emma's crooked smile, her passion for drawing dragons, how she'd fold paper airplanes with her hospital discharge papers. With each story, the hallway seemed to shrink, the door between them growing thinner. "She sounds brave," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "Braver than me." "We're all brave in different ways," Michael answered, surprising himself with the tenderness in his voice. "And scared in different ways too." A soft thud suggested Victoria had pressed her palm against the door. Without thinking, Michael mirrored the gesture, his calloused hand splayed against the cool wood. For a moment, he forgot he was an employee. Forgot about the power imbalance between them. Forgot everything except the strange intimacy of two wounded souls connecting through a barrier neither was quite ready to open. "Michael," Victoria whispered, using his first name for the very first time. "Will you be here tomorrow night?" The shattered glass crunched beneath Michael's boots as he swept the beam of his flashlight across Victoria's ransacked office. Her face, usually composed in boardroom perfection, now drained of color as she clutched his arm. "They found me," she whispered, her fingers digging into his jacket sleeve. The security alarm still wailed in the distance. But all Michael could hear was the thundering of his own heart. Someone had breached the building, someone looking specifically for Victoria. "We need to move," Michael said, his military training surging to the surface as he guided her toward the emergency stairwell. For weeks, he'd been her nighttime guardian, separated by a bedroom door. Now, with the threat no longer abstract, that barrier had vanished in an instant. Victoria stumbled on her designer heels, and Michael caught her without hesitation, his arm circling her waist with protective instinct rather than professional obligation. In the dim glow of emergency lighting, Victoria's eyes met his with startling clarity. "I have a safe house," she said, her voice steadying. "But I need your help getting there." The admission cost her, he could see it in the tight line of her jaw. This woman who commanded boardrooms and controlled billion-dollar decisions was asking, not ordering. They reached her private garage, and Victoria pressed her car keys into his palm. Their fingers touched, lingered. "I trust you," she said simply. 3 words that transformed everything between them. As Michael navigated the city streets, Victoria made calls, activating security protocols with the same efficiency she ran her empire. But between directives her hand found his on the gearshift. Not the touch of someone being rescued, but of an equal offering strength in return. "I've never told anyone else about that night," she said quietly. About the closet, the break-in. Her vulnerability hung between them. Precious and rare. "You're the only one who knows both versions of me." Michael's throat tightened as he realized the truth. Somewhere between midnight confessions and this moment of crisis, they had stopped being employer and employee. They had become something neither had dared name. Something that made the danger around them feel strangely like opportunity. "If you could go anywhere right now, where would it be?" Victoria's question floated through the darkness of the safe house living room, where they'd been keeping watch in shifts for 3 days. Michael looked up from cleaning his service weapon, surprised by the lightness in her tone after everything they'd been through. The moonlight caught the curve of her smile as she sat cross-legged on the sofa, her corporate armor long abandoned for a simple t-shirt and sweatpants. "Somewhere with Emma," he answered honestly, setting the gun aside. "Maybe that beach in Florida she's always talking about. The one with shells shaped like butterflies." The mention of his daughter usually reinforced the boundaries between them, but tonight it felt like offering Victoria a piece of his heart. "I've never built a sandcastle," Victoria admitted, her voice carrying a wistfulness that made Michael's chest tighten. "Childhood was structured differently for me." "That's criminal," Michael teased, and the laugh that escaped her seemed to change the very air between them. "Everyone deserves at least one proper sandcastle in their life." Victoria's eyes held his across the darkened room. "What else have I missed, Michael?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. "Pillow forts," he offered, his voice dropping lower. "Breakfast for dinner. Dancing in the rain." With each suggestion, the professional distance between them seemed to shrink. "Tell me about the rain," she whispered, drawing her knees to her chest. Michael described a summer storm from his childhood, the words painting pictures that made Victoria lean closer, entranced. When he finished, the silence between them hummed with unspoken possibility. "I've never told anyone about my dreams," Victoria confessed suddenly. "The real ones, not the corporate goals everyone expects." "Tell me," Michael urged, and as she began to speak of gardens and open skies and a life unburdened by expectations, he realized they had crossed into territory more intimate than any physical encounter. Her dreams were flowing into his hands like water, precious and unguarded. His pulse quickened with the terrifying recognition that he was falling in love with the woman he was forbidden to touch. Not as her employee. Not while she was vulnerable. Not when everything about their connection defied the careful boundaries of his life. Yet in the space between what they wanted and what they allowed themselves, something profound was blooming. Something neither had the courage to name. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in Michael's hands as he stood outside Victoria's office door. Inside lay the offer letter from Westbrook Security. Triple his current salary, full medical benefits for Emma, and a corner office with his name on it. Everything he'd been working toward for years. Everything he needed to give his daughter the life she deserved. The crisis with Victoria's stalker had been resolved last week, the perpetrator arrested, her safety assured. His job here was technically complete. "You're leaving." Victoria's voice startled him. She stood in the doorway, her expression carefully composed, but her eyes betrayed the hurt beneath. The woman who once spoke to him only through a bedroom door now stood before him, vulnerable and unguarded. "I haven't decided," Michael answered, though the resignation letter burned in his pocket. "Emma's medical treatments." "I understand," Victoria interrupted, her voice soft with resignation. "You've always put her first. It's what I've always admired about you." The admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Michael looked down at the offer letter again. Security, stability, the sensible choice. Yet something else tugged at his heart, the memory of midnight confessions, of trust hard won, of the woman who knew his soul better than anyone ever had. What if there was another way? Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint jasmine of her perfume. Not as my employee. Not as my bodyguard. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. What are you saying? Victoria took the envelope from his hands and set it aside. I'm saying I don't need someone to guard my door anymore. Her fingers trembled slightly as they found his. I need someone brave enough to walk through it with me. The weight of years of caution and responsibility pressed against Michael's chest. For so long, he'd built walls to protect himself and Emma from disappointment, from risk, from hope itself. But standing here, with Victoria's hand in his, he realized that true security wasn't found in higher salaries or corner offices. Emma asked about you yesterday, he said, his voice rough with emotion. She wants to know when you're coming to help with that sandcastle you promised. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as Michael slowly tore the resignation letter in half. Some doors, once opened, were never meant to be closed again. The journey from guarding a door to opening your heart isn't always a straight path, but it's one worth taking. Michael and Victoria found that sometimes the walls we build for protection become the very barriers keeping us from what we truly need. Their story reminds us that courage isn't about facing danger. It's about facing vulnerability with an open heart. If this story touched something in you today, if you believe in second chances and the power of connection, share it with someone who might need this reminder. Life has a way of placing the right people in our path, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Subscribe for more stories that celebrate the quiet courage it takes to choose love over fear, and remember, the most beautiful chapters of our lives often begin with the words, "What if?"